I hate my life. The last thing I want to do is follow a badass like Jinx McClure down Rodeo Drive on such a nice day. Somewhere, someone is probably cracking up with laughter, making fun of me. Not that she was difficult to track. She pulled on oversized sunglasses and wrapped her signature blonde hair in a hideous orange scarf. And to top it all off, she wore some kind of jacket with a belt, even though the weather was quite pleasant in Beverly Hills that day. Maybe she's trying to copy Liz Taylor, trying to remain unrecognized, I thought sarcastically. Whatever her motives, the result was far from intended. She stood out like a pimple on a teenager's nose. I was sweating under my sports jacket, and the digital camera tucked under my arm wasn't helping. So I was delighted when she suddenly ducked into some boutique with an Italian name that I didn't know. Maybe the air conditioning will help cool me down. I didn't understand what was so attractive about her at all. Jinx was sexy enough in that meaty, vulgar way, but Los Angeles is full of beautiful, sexy women. Of course, most of them didn't have their own reality show, and hopefully most of them didn't spend their lives eating, drinking, dancing, swearing, and having sex in front of television cameras to the horror of millions of viewers every week. But I don't judge other people's tastes, although I do it all the time. No, my curse is to document photographically the lives of people like Jinx behind the scenes to excite fans and detractors. What a shallow, pathetic job. I casually stood behind the androgynous mannequin so as not to lose sight of my target. She was hanging around the jewelry counter in a way that struck me as either suspicious or a sign of intoxication. In her case, it could be both. I pulled out my camera and started filming. Of course, this little bitch suddenly leaned over the counter, grabbed an expensive-looking watch, and stuffed it into her jacket pocket. Gotcha, I grinned. She must have noticed me out of the corner of her eye, because she suddenly straightened up and turned to face me. I thought she would run away hastily, but I've been wrong about women before, and I'll probably be wrong again in the future. Her face contorted with rage, and she suddenly rushed at me, shouting at the top of her voice. Persecutor, I couldn't believe it, but I kept filming until she came closer and closer. Then, as I began to dodge to the side, a man grabbed my arms with amazing strength and held me in place. Hell, I didn't even notice the uniformed guard. A moment later, the store manager magically appeared on stage. "Did something disturb you, Miss McClure?" he asked flatteringly. "This guy was following me," she screamed. "I think he's some kind of pervert." The manager turned to me and asked for ID. After examining it, he said, "What do you have to say in your defense, Mr. Cohen?" I looked at him coldly. "Look in her jacket pocket," I told him. When he looked at me with confusion, I picked up the camera and switched it to playback mode. On the small screen, Jinx was clearly visible pulling at the clock. The manager deftly reached into her pocket and pulled out a watch. The price tag was still attached. He nodded to the guard, and he released my hands. He then looked closely at Jinx. "Miss McClure, we would prefer that you shop elsewhere today." I picked up the camera again and continued filming, thinking that she would leave in disgrace, but she surprised me again. She raised her hand and hit my camera in the face. "Damn paparazzi," she screamed and rushed towards the exit while I stood holding my bruised eye. "Damn, this hurts." The store manager was not surprised. He turned to me and said indifferently, "Mr. Cohen, we would also like you to leave the store before you spill blood on the carpet." It was cold, I thought as I walked out the door, but I couldn't find any anger within me. This is what I expected. In Hollywood, a person in my profession is not highly respected. Hell, I'm not too impressed with myself. But despite the pain in my eye, the outing was successful, so I headed back to the agency to show my boss what I had filmed. Today, most paparazzi don't work for magazines or tabloids. We sign contracts with agencies who sell our work to the highest bidder. The bad part about this kind of collaboration for a guy like me is that if I get lucky and catch a good moment, the agency takes the lion's share of the money. On the other hand, the chances of getting a lucky shot are about the same as winning the lottery. At least the checks from the agency keep coming in those long periods between good shots, and if you manage to get a good shot, the bonuses can be quite good. So I was confident that the agency would be pleased with what I had captured on my memory card and headed towards Starla's desk. Starla was an editor by appointment, which made her my nominal boss, but she was also my best friend at the agency. In fact, she was my best friend in Los Angeles. She was also stunningly beautiful, which gave me extra incentive to see her as often as possible. So that no one misunderstands me, I hasten to add that I am a faithful husband. I'm not going to say that Starla never figured in my fantasies, but I never, under any circumstances, allowed myself to act on those thoughts. The truth is that it wouldn't have made any difference. Have you ever had a girlfriend, but nothing more? That's how Starla was. It was clear from the very beginning that we liked each other. Soon we were joking and telling stories about the agency, our clients, and the celebrities we cover. But there were never any hints, no glances, no touches that would indicate that we were more than just friends. When my wife met her, Kelly wasn't the least bit jealous. Actually, this surprised me a little, because in the past, whenever Kelly thought a woman was hitting on me, she would immediately put out her claws. But she didn't even blink when I introduced her to Starla. I had already demonstrated that I could not predict what a woman would do, and my powerlessness was again confirmed when they seemed to find common ground. So I stormed into Starla's office with a cheerful, "Hey Starla, you're going to love what I got for you today." She smiled when she heard my voice, but when she saw my face, she gasped, "Oh my God, David, what happened to your eye? He's bleeding." She made me lie down on the couch in her office and ran to get some ice, which she then applied to my wound. As I talked about my adventure with Jinx, Starla became more and more excited. "This little crap," she exclaimed. "She could have blinded you. You must arrest her." Yes, I thought, in Hollywood? Of course it will happen. So I just lay there, calming my throbbing eyes, and once again wondering how I ended up in this life in the first place. I was born in a place that couldn't be further from Hollywood, on top of a mountain in Tennessee, Monteagle Mountain, to be exact. In fact, Monteagle is not a mountain, but simply part of the Cumberland Plateau. We lived in the small town of Swanee, which is famous mainly for being home to the University of the South, where my father taught philosophy. As a child, I was a reliable, optimistic boy, and my mother did everything she could to erase that optimism from me. I don't know if she was born a pessimist or became one over time. However, she had a negative outlook on almost everything in life, starting with her only child. When I wanted to try out for Little League Baseball, she told me straight up that I would never make the team. Likewise, she refused to support me in any other endeavors. When I said I was going to work as a photographer for the school newspaper, she warned me that it would be a waste of time. If I look back at my childhood, I cannot remember a single time when she said even one kind word. Over time, she began to despise my dreams and aspirations so much that she began to call me Don Quixote because, according to her, I was always chasing hopeless goals. One day, she even called me that in front of my classmates, and as children do, they picked up on the nickname and started teasing me. Of course, I was not the only one who became the object of her criticism. She also had no qualms about humiliating my father and did not hesitate to do so in my presence. When you're little, you don't question why people are the way they are, you just accept them. Looking back, I cannot understand why my father tolerated her. However, he never said a single harsh word to her, and they rarely quarreled. Maybe he was overwhelmed by her strong personality, or maybe he loved her so much that it didn't matter. I remember one day after she made me cry, he took me for a walk. We walked along Greens View Road past Suwanee Golf Course until we came to the edge of the plateau. From this point, we could look down onto the valley below us. My father put his arm around my shoulders. "Don't let your mom get the best of you, David. She doesn't want to offend you, that's just the way she is. Keep following your dreams, and they will come true someday." I continued to move forward, but judging by my progress, I must admit that my mother's predictions were much more accurate than my father's. As a child, one of my favorite Christmas gifts was a cheap camera that my father gave me. I was fascinated by how this little box was able to capture and preserve a moment in time, but at the same time infuse it with artistic and emotional values that go beyond the subject itself. I spent many hours wandering through forests and cliffsides, photographing everything that caught my eye. So it was no surprise that when I attended the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, I decided to major in fine arts with a concentration in photography. My mother, of course, thought I was wasting my time and their money, but my father bought me a book about Ansel Adams, Henry Cartier-Bresson, Alfred Eisenstadt, and other great photographers to inspire me. I also quickly found inspiration in a student named Kelly Mays, who was studying in the Department of Visual and Performing Arts. Kelly also had a dream. She wanted to become a singer and songwriter. We met in our second year, and I immediately fell under the spell of her beauty and personality. I remember bringing Kelly to Swanee to introduce her to my parents. My father was quite impressed with my new girlfriend. My mother was polite enough, but when she was alone with me, she warned darkly, "This girl will break your heart." By this time, I was old enough to understand that pessimism and negativism were simply part of my mother's character, and they no longer had the same suffocating influence on me as in childhood. Accordingly, Kelly and I got married shortly after graduating from university, and the world seemed full of promise for both of us. You can work almost anywhere as a photographer, so I was ready to start searching for my dream. But for the singer-songwriter, there's only one Mecca, Nashville. So Kelly and I moved to Music City. While she was walking around the Music Row studios looking for someone to listen to her audition, I was looking for any photography-related work. Eventually, I found a job as a photographer's assistant, not in a studio, but in a retail chain that offered cheap portraits to those who couldn't afford anything better. For the next 2 years, our life was a mixture of dreams and disappointments. When the head photographer at my store came to work drunk, I was promoted to take his place. But I still made a living convincing non-photogenic people that they really needed to buy a set of glossy 8 by 10-inch photographs to give to their relatives. It was a job, and it brought a salary, but it was far from what I dreamed of. As for Kelly, she made a lot of connections, met a lot of people in the music industry, and received a lot of support. But the closest she ever got to the stage at the Ryman Auditorium was working as a waitress at a bar on Lower Broadway. There is even a joke in Nashville. To find a musician, all you have to do is shout, "Hey, waiter!" This didn't amuse Kelly at all, so I wasn't too surprised when she announced one night that she wanted to move to Los Angeles. Nashville doesn't understand her, she complained, and she's sure the West Coast, with its special atmosphere, is exactly what she needs. In my opinion, the chances of getting a contract in Los Angeles were no better than in Nashville, and the cost of living in Nashville was much lower. But logic and common sense mean little in an argument with a young woman who has firmly decided what she wants, especially if her partner is crazy about her. So we packed our modest belongings into my Toyota and, with a loan from her parents, set off on an endless journey to Los Angeles. At first, it seemed like life was back to normal again, but a casual acquaintance hinted to me about opportunities for freelance photographers. "This town is full of celebrities," he said, "and people are obsessed with what these celebrities do and what they look like. If you can catch one of them in an informal setting, you can make good money selling these photographs." History is built on such modest conversations. I should tell you a little about Starla. She's technically my boss because she's an assignment editor at a photo agency. As I already mentioned, paparazzi no longer sell their pictures themselves, at least most of them don't. Instead, they work for an agency that takes their best photos and sells them to the highest bidder, giving us a small cut of the deal. It's better for the media because they don't have to deal with dozens of photographers, and it's better for us because we don't go hungry between sales. When I was hired at the agency, they sent me to Starla Wilson. When I heard her name, I half expected to see some older actress. But I found a young woman about my age who was exceptionally intelligent and talented. Judging by her appearance, I thought she might be an actress or model, but she had no interest in that side of the industry. In truth, she had little interest in the publicity side of things either, but she was very good at what she did, even if she hated the phoniness of it. I think that's what brought us together. Neither of us could believe that we were stuck in this selfish quagmire, that is, the entertainment industry. We could talk about it for hours, regaling each other with stories of terrible behavior, dishonest negotiations, and inflated egos that had long since lost all touch with reality. Of course, being around someone as beautiful as Starla wasn't hard at all, but I never tried to hit on her because of Kelly, and Starla did her best to keep me from crossing the line. It was clear that she liked me, but she never flirted with me, never noticed me when I noticed her. We were friends, comrades in some vague search, but this path was much easier thanks to the fact that there was someone nearby who shared your views. One day, when we were having lunch together, I asked her what she was looking for, and she even blushed. "I'll tell you, but don't laugh at me." After I swore that I wouldn't, she said, "I think I'm looking for that knight on a white horse who will take me away from here." I didn't even feel like laughing. The truth is, I'm looking for something like this. Not a white knight, but a way out, a path to a better life than this, I told her. "Well, aren't we a couple, ragamuffin?" she asked, and I laughed, recognizing the line from the third Mad Max movie. This was another thread connecting us. We even liked the same old movies. When I returned home in the evening, it was already late, but I arrived before Kelly. She never had any luck as a performer, but she got a job that brought her a little closer to her goal. Kelly now worked as an assistant at a major talent agency and enjoyed interacting with Grammy winners and movie stars every day. Her salary was almost the same as mine, which was helpful, but I didn't like that she often had to work late. Sal Minucci, her boss, always had something urgent to do for her, and lately I felt like I was spending more time with my colleagues than with Kelly. However, she came home shortly after I opened a cold beer and at least showed concern by buying Thai takeout, so we sat down to dinner in our small apartment. Kelly was full of the latest gossip about this or that famous person, and she was so carried away by the story of her day that she did not even notice my black eye. Her indifference annoyed me a little, so when she paused after tasting a particularly spicy curry, I took the opportunity to start talking about my run-in with Jinx. Kelly really started paying attention to me when I mentioned Jinx's name, and when I showed her my eye as the climax of my story, she suddenly became very sympathetic. "Oh God, David, your eyes look terrible. Are you in pain?" It seems that the combination of my injury and my encounter with the reality star really made an impression on Kelly, because that night she went to bed naked, something she hadn't done in a long time. I tried to pull her closer to me because I was very excited, but she pushed me away. "No, David, today you are the one who suffered. This evening is just for you. Lay on your back and let me take care of you." When I came to my senses, I tried to return the favor to Kelly, but she kept saying that this evening was just for me. She then ran to the bathroom to brush her teeth. When she returned, she was already in her pajamas, so I put on my boxers, did my hygiene routine, and got into bed next to her. Cupping her warm body with a spoon, the last meaningful thought that came into my head before sleep took me was, "I hope someone stabs me in the other eye tomorrow." The next morning, when I woke up, Kelly had already left for work. This was not surprising. She often left early. But I was disappointed because I wanted to let her know once again how much last night meant to me, and maybe even try to do it again. Since that was no longer an option, I decided to buy flowers on the way home. Kelly always loved fresh flowers in the house. When I arrived at the agency, Starla looked at me and smiled widely. "Looks like someone got a lot of attention for their blue face last night," she said with a grin. I involuntarily blushed. Damn, how could she know that, I thought. But I didn't deny it, and it seems to me that Starla was sincerely happy for me. I shared with her my frustrations with how things were going with Kelly, and she was happy to see any signs of improvement. We spent the morning looking at the photos I took of Jinx the other day. There were a few shots we couldn't use for various reasons, but I was able to get one that showed both Jinx's face and her hand stealing a watch, and another one where she lunges at me with her hand raised. "These photos will make a splash," Starla said. "Honestly, I'm surprised her agent hasn't contacted us yet to buy all the pictures. In this twisted town, you don't even have to post photos to make money from them." Often PR people or agents buy all the rights to a series of compromising photos so as not to tarnish the reputation of their spoiled charges. Of course, there are some pictures that are so hot that they cost more on the open market than any one person can afford. There are also people who are not worth anyone protecting them. What ends up in the media can tell you a lot about the status of a celebrity in that city. It will be interesting to see if there is anyone willing to protect Jinx. It was a wonderful day again in Los Angeles. The city averaged 300 sunshine days a year, so Starla and I decided to have lunch in the park. We managed to find a bench that wasn't occupied by tourists or seagulls, and we unwrapped our food. I was still in a good mood from last night, and that was probably what prompted me to ask Starla such a personal question. Why has such a beautiful girl like you not yet found that very white knight who will take her away from here, away from all this dirt? I asked, ironically pointing at the beautiful lake, palm trees, and green grass in front of us. She snorted at my little joke, but then her face became serious. I could give you a snarky answer, David, but to be honest, I don't know what I'm looking for. I try not to show it, but I'm pretty confused. I felt embarrassed by my clumsy curiosity and tried to apologize, but she waved her hand. No, it's okay. I feel like I can trust you. To be honest, I feel much more comfortable with you than with anyone else. I didn't understand where this was coming from. I can't remember what I did to earn her trust other than pestering her all the time. I have no shortage of offers to date guys, she continued, but none of them have really touched me. They are all so passionate about themselves, trying to impress me with their achievements, money, or the size of their private parts. This is such a farce I didn't find a hero among them. She tried to smile, but I realized that she was unhappy with the way her life was turning out. Damn, who would have thought that such a smart, talented, and beautiful girl like Starla could be so unhappy? I didn't know what to say to try to cheer her up, so I decided to change the subject back to work. We soon started making snarky remarks about Jinx McClure again, and this seemed to improve her mood. When we got back to the office, Starla went to check her email, and I went back to looking through the selected photos when suddenly the front door opened and a man in a cheap suit walked in. He talked to one of the secretaries and then came up to me. "Are you David Cohen?" he asked, and when I confirmed, he simply handed me a stack of papers and said, "Then you will be served with a subpoena." Starla came up behind me and put her hand on my shoulder. I sat there like a fool. "Summons? Summons for what reason?" The man rolled his eyes. "It's certainly none of my business, buddy, but it looks like you've just been served with divorce papers." I looked at him as if he were a creature in a laboratory. David Cohen, right? All I could do was nod. "Sorry, buddy, no mistakes," he said, and with that, he turned and walked out the door. As I sat stunned, Starla grabbed my hand and half dragged me into her office, away from prying eyes. I glanced at the document in front of me, and the words divorce seemed to jump out of the paper. I looked at Starla. "I don't understand. Last night everything was just like in the early days of our marriage. She was so loving and caring, and now this." Starla looked at me with sympathy. "It was goodbye sex," she said quietly, her way of saying, "Sorry, I'm leaving you." While I sat there, not understanding anything, Starla flipped through the papers. "There's a note from Kelly on the last page," she told me. When I picked it up, Starla deliberately turned to her computer so that I could read the note in private, but I still read it out loud. "David, I'm with Sal Minucci now. You're a good guy, but you can't please me the way he does. Please just sign the attached papers so we can both move on. I'm sorry I'm too much of a coward to say this in person. I will always have feelings for you. I hope you have a wonderful life. Kelly." Now I'm just angry. Is that all? This is all she can say after 5 years of marriage, that she ran away to live with her boss. What a banal scenario. Do you want to hear the best? That last paragraph in her little note sounds exactly like something she watched in some stupid Lifetime movie last week. So much for sorry, so much for our marriage. She was playing David, Starla said softly. You have to understand, Everyone plays in this city. Then she leaned over and gave me a sisterly hug. I'm really sorry. You deserve better. Then she straightened up. Why don't you leave here? You don't want to sit here and listen to gossip. Come back tomorrow morning, and I will find a new task for you. Believe me, being busy is the best medicine. I walked away with my head down as I walked through the office. I didn't want to see sympathetic glances or, even worse, hear cynical grins. When I got home, everything seemed fine until I walked into our bedroom. Everything in her closet, everything in her dresser, and everything in her bathroom was gone. Damn, I thought, she must have waited until I left for work and came back to take everything. I wandered around the living room and kitchen, but did not find anything missing there. In some strange way, this made me feel even worse. None of what we had accumulated during our marriage was of value to her. I even found our wedding album. Apparently, she didn't want any reminders of me. If we had a fireplace, I would burn it. I thought about going out and getting drunk, but I've never been much of a drinker, and this didn't seem like the best time to start. I was in enough pain as it was. Deliberately causing a severe headache and stomach upset didn't seem like a smart solution. Instead, I got in my car and drove to Mulholland Drive. When I finally got there, I parked at the observation deck and walked out to look at the lights of Los Angeles. I did this sometimes when I needed to think about something, probably because it reminded me of the lookout at Suwanee. After a day like today, I needed something familiar to calm me down. Everyone in this town plays, Starla said. Like a fool, I believed that Kelly still loved me, still wanted to be my wife. My marriage was like a movie set, I thought bitterly. Everything looks nice and normal until you look behind the scenes and see that everything is fake. The view from the hills was beautiful, but that night the flickering lights did not bring me any pleasure. This whole damn town is a facade, I decided. A shiny bait that lures you in, gives you hope, and then shatters it to pieces when you least expect it. Then I remembered my mother's prediction. She was right about Kelly. I was starting to think she was right about everything. I returned to the apartment more depressed than when I left. When the alarm went off, I hurriedly rolled over to turn it off so as not to wake Kelly. Then I remembered that I would never have to pay attention to Kelly again, and my depression returned. But the signal was annoying, so I turned it off anyway and Pop got into the shower. When I got to the office, I took out the divorce petition to look at it again. We didn't have any property that was valuable, so it wasn't an issue, and Kelly didn't seem to care about alimony, even though she wouldn't get much of it given our income. All in all, it looks like we're in for a quick and clean break. However, I decided that I would not rush into signing. I didn't want a reconciliation, especially after yesterday's humiliation, but I decided that I wanted to stall for time. Kelly seemed in a hurry to get this all over with quickly, and the thought that I could slow her plans down a little gave me a little satisfaction. At that moment, Starla came out of her office and beckoned to me, so I went inside. After closing the door, she came and sat next to me. "How are you, David?" she asked sympathetically. I told her I survived my first night alone and what I discovered when I got home. "She planned it all, didn't she?" Starla said with a sarcastic tone, and it made me feel better that someone else was angry about how I was treated. "I think you went to Mulholland last night," she said more softly. She knew about my habit of going there when I needed to sort out my thoughts. I told her I went, but it didn't help. She nodded in understanding and then said, "The best thing you can do now is keep busy. If you feel ready, I have a new assignment and they specifically asked you." "I'll take it," I said quickly. "Better wait until you hear the whole story," Starla said ominously. Then she explained everything. Mickey Morningstar was America's sweetheart, a sweet girl who began her career in children's television and successfully transitioned into roles as an actress in her 20s in film and TV. Her only problem, Starla told me, was that her reputation was too good. "Virtue is not for sale," was her agent's brief opinion. So Mickey's agent came up with a little script, especially for the tabloids, to show a different, racier side of his young client. Although she was constantly seen in the company of her regular boyfriend at parties and events, The agent wanted to stage a fake fling with a known bad boy. It was a classic move. The paparazzi take pictures exposing Mickey's affair with the bad guy. Her nice boyfriend leaves her. The media goes into hysterics, and as the excitement reaches its peak, Mickey and her old boyfriend are reunited to the delight of their adoring fans. This is called a classic Hollywood ending. The whole story was so cynical that I felt dirty even thinking about it. But why did they ask me specifically? I asked Starla. It's all about authenticity, she explained to me. You have a reputation as a hunter, a man who can find his mark and take a shot when no one else can. It makes the whole affair story more believable. Indeed, I was luckier than many in getting successful shots in difficult situations. As a boy, I spent many days exploring Savage Gorge, photographing birds and animals. I learned to move silently through the forest, climb trees, and remain motionless, while a doe and her cub passed directly under the branch on which I was sitting. I was able to put this experience to good use on several paparazzi assignments. But that didn't make it any easier for me to accept the task. So nothing about it will be real. Not the romance, not the date, not even the photos. What a farce. Although I didn't want to admit it, there was another reason why I didn't really want to take this job. After what Kelly had done, the thought of filming an affair, especially a fake one, was too painful. As I listened to Starla describe the scenario, I couldn't help but think about Kelly's little love scene the night before she so unceremoniously dumped me. And then Starla told me the most unpleasant thing. The agent who orchestrated this whole farce was none other than Sal Minucci, Kelly's new lover. Minucci? I was indignant. Why did he need me? Does he want to humiliate me even more than he has already humiliated me? Calm down, David, Starla said firmly. Perhaps he really has such intentions, but maybe this is his way of paying off you. He took something of yours, now he gives something back to you. That's how it works in this city. I made a hollow sound in my throat. But what I really think, she continued, is that Sal just needs you because he needs his little drama to be as authentic as possible. Selling the story to the public is all he cares about. Well, he may want me for the job, but I see no reason to help the bastard, I said. Starla looked at me carefully. You can refuse this job if you want, but it won't change anything. Also, do you want to let him know that you can't handle it, or do you want to show him that you can work no matter what? I thought about her words. It was not easy to accept, but I decided that I was not going to cower in front of Minucci. I'll hold back for now and take revenge later. Okay, Starla, I'm in, I said reluctantly. The next day I went to the love nest, where the good girl and the bad guy were supposed to meet. I put on my hunting camouflage and sneakers suitable for tree climbing. Well, at least I'll look like a hunter, I muttered sarcastically. I thought I had already been to every corner of Greater Los Angeles, but I was wrong. It's good that they gave me GPS coordinates, otherwise I would never have found this place. It was located deep in the canyon, in the foothills of the Sierra Madre. When I finally arrived, I found there were enough people there to make a full-length film. In addition to Sal, who came up with this fake romance, there were 2 lovebirds, plus several assistants, 2 makeup artists, and even a director for the shoot. In addition, the bad guy's real girlfriend and Mickey's regular boyfriend also showed up to the set. I think they wanted to make sure everything was in order. A real production. As I learned, the Love Nest actually belonged to the president of the talent agency where Sal worked. I needed to shoot the scene without the house being recognizable. After some time, Minucci approached me with noticeable excitement. Listen, Cohen, he said nervously, no hard feelings about Kelly, right? Life goes on, you know. I had already told Starla that I wouldn't get into an argument with Sal now, so I just nodded and said, Sure, Sal, it is what it is, business is business. He looked at me doubtfully, but was interrupted by a call from the director, and he left to see what needed to be done. As for me, I decided that the less I had to do with Minucci, the better. They decided to film the scene in a small garden behind the house. 2 secret lovers were on the same side of the canyon. I got a job on another one. The director wanted me to shoot through the foliage to make it look like I was taking them by surprise. The two lovers stood and chatted, sipping lattes, until the director gave them the command. Then, having given the coffee to the assistant, they fell into hugging each other that looked so real that I even got hard. I started shooting using leaves and branches to make the shots look natural. The director announced a break, and the two actors immediately broke the hug and returned to their coffee. Their makeup artists rushed over to fix the makeup that had been damaged by their passion. The director approached me. "Is that enough for you, or do you want to try something else that can make the shot better?" he asked. I looked around and came up with something. In less than a minute, I managed to climb up a huge eucalyptus tree, using the knots and growths of broken branches as supports. Once at the top, I got a great view of the two lovers through the branches. We did one more take from that angle before the director finally announced, "Cut." Minucci went down to the house to check on his client, who had gone inside to freshen up. The bad guy went to calm down his real girlfriend, who didn't look very happy. I quickly reviewed the footage to make sure nothing had gone wrong. Before I put my camera away and climbed down from the tree, I decided to take a few pictures of the house and garden in case I needed them for an exclusive. As I walked the camera around the house, some movement outside one of the windows caught my eye, and I used the zoom to see what it was. The sunlight fell so that I could see straight into the back bedroom. There, hidden from view of the others, were Sal and Mickey, locked in an embrace that eclipsed the game they were showing a few minutes ago. At first I couldn't believe my eyes, but then I started clicking frame after frame as they kissed and hugged like longtime lovers. Then one of the assistants knocked on the door to check on them, and they quickly broke their embrace. I sat on a large eucalyptus branch, stunned by what I had just seen. Sal cheating on Kelly with Mickey. Oh, Kelly will be furious when she finds out. I realized that I had a chance to get revenge, but I needed to think it through carefully. When I returned to the office, Starla was eager to hear how the shoot went. When I showed her the official photos, she was impressed. I was afraid that they would look unnatural and staged, but they turned out great. If I didn't know better, I would think that these two were really dating in secret. "Well, if you want to see real passion, take a look at the other pictures I took," I said with amusement, and showed her the pictures I took through the bedroom window. She looked at me confused until I explained, "These were taken after filming ended when Mickey and Sal thought no one was watching." Then it dawned on Starla, and she gasped, "So they really are having an affair, and they are hiding it from everyone." A thoughtful expression appeared on her face. "You have to give Sal credit for his chutzpah," she said. "He had the courage to arrange a fake affair for his client while continuing a real one with her." But that's not all, David. An agent is prohibited from having an affair with a client. Plus, considering Sal is 20 years older than Mickey, it looks even more disgusting. Like I said, he has a lot of nerve to pull something like that off. "But why did he need Kelly when he already has a hot young thing like Mickey?" I asked. "He knows he won't be in a long-term relationship with Mickey," Starla replied. "But I think being able to have both her and Kelly at the same time is a huge adrenaline rush for someone as horny as Sal." "Well, he may have some nerve, but now I'm holding his ass," I said gloatingly. "Don't be so sure about it," she countered. "These photos may cause problems between Kelly and Sal, but they may not be enough to convince others that Sal is actually doing something so reckless. Sal could probably explain these pictures as simply an expression of gratitude from his appreciative client." "I know what I saw," I said hotly, "and there was much more than just sympathy between these two." "I believe you, David," Starla quickly responded, "but I'm not the one you need to convince. If you could get something else, another batch of these pictures, we'd have something to really work with." "Great," I said sadly. "How will I do this?" "Don't be discouraged," she said. "If Minucci is so stupid that he started an affair with a client and is brazen enough to continue it in public, he will certainly make another mistake in the future. Now that you are aware, you can observe. I'm confident you'll get what you need, and when you do, I know how to help you make the most of it." It was disappointing to think that what I already had wasn't enough, but I was grateful for Starla's encouraging speech and vowed to continue pursuing Manucci. At least now I knew he was vulnerable. I'll just have to wait for my chance. In the meantime, it was nice to feel like Starla was an accomplice. When I went to bed that night, I couldn't sleep for a long time because different emotions were swirling in my head. Kelly's betrayal continued to eat away at me like acid, and having to work with the guy who cuckolded me only made it worse. However, the discovery that Kelly's lover was cheating on her and the idea that I could get revenge on both of them was encouraging. The fact that Starla and I now had a little secret also gave me strength. I was taking regular pictures when my cell phone rang. When I answered, I was surprised to hear Kelly's voice, and she was clearly not in a friendly mood. "Why haven't you signed these papers yet?" she demanded. "Do you even have a lawyer?" I was perversely glad that I had irritated her at least a little, and I calmly said that I had not yet had time to deal with this issue. This really turned her on. "What are you waiting for? There is nothing to argue about, no alimony, no division of property. Just sign the damn agreement and send it back," she screamed. "I'm sorry, Kelly, but what's important to you doesn't matter to me anymore," I replied sharply and ended the conversation. I was going to stall for time, and if Kelly didn't like it, let her put up with it. Over lunch in her office, I told Starla about the call, and she smiled evilly. "Kelly doesn't seem to want to drag out the process. I bet she's afraid that if this drags on, Sal will lose interest in her. Of course, she doesn't know that Sal has already found other entertainment," she said with a grin. I simply grinned back. It looks like Kelly's plans may be going awry. After the shock of Kelly's betrayal, I mostly kept to myself socially. The thought of seeking female companionship did not appeal to me at all. But now that the pain has subsided a little, I noticed that my attitude began to change. I decided it was time to get back into the game. After making this decision, I realized that the person I most wanted to start a relationship with was Starla. Now that I was single, I was hoping that we could start dating outside of work. But approaching this issue was not so easy. When you've been friends with a woman for a long time, it's very scary to try to change the nature of this relationship. If she doesn't have feelings for you, not only will you be rejected, but you also risk ruining the friendship. I thought it would have been easier if I had just met Starla instead of working with her for so long. The result of all this thinking was that I decided to approach the situation carefully. If I could understand how she felt about me, I could either move forward or retreat without damaging our friendship, I hoped. One day, over lunch in her office, I cautiously brought up this conversation. "So, is there a man in your life right now, Starla?" I asked. "I never hear you talk about dating or anything like that." She was silent for so long that I thought I had made a terrible mistake. When she finally looked up at me, they were red, and I mentally cursed myself for my clumsiness. "I didn't tell you about this before," she said in a quiet, tense voice. "But when I was in college, a boy took advantage of me. I was at a party, and someone must have slipped something into my drink. I don't remember anything until my roommate found me beaten and naked on the floor in front of my room. She took me to the student clinic." "God, Starla, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed. I felt like I was below par. I wanted to hug Starla and comfort her, but after what she had just said, I was afraid that would be the worst thing I could do. In the end, the only thing I could think of was to get her some tissues. She nodded gratefully and blew her nose. Ever since then, I have had problems with men. That's probably why I'm waiting for my white knight. I'm looking for someone I can trust and who won't hurt me. She stopped crying, but I could see that she was still very emotional, and it was my fault. I was desperately trying to figure out how to fix the situation, and suddenly it dawned on me. "Listen," I said decisively, "let's skip work today. I know you love art, and the Museum of Modern Art recently opened a new exhibition. Let's see it." She hesitated for a moment, and then a determined expression appeared on her face. "Okay, David, let's play truant." We took the purple subway line to the Civic Center station and then walked a couple blocks to Mocha. As we walked around the exhibition, I couldn't stop thinking about what I learned today. It's not surprising that Starla never talked about men in her life, they simply didn't exist. After what she had been through, I could understand why she no longer trusted men. However, she didn't say she didn't want to deal with men anymore, so maybe I still have a chance. But I knew for sure that I would have to move very slowly and carefully so as not to scare her. After we finished touring the exhibit, I walked her a couple of blocks to the Walt Disney Concert Hall. This is one of my favorite places to take photos. The metal walls designed by Jerry create fantastical, complex shapes that create flowing surfaces and backgrounds. The entire building looks more like abstract art than a performing arts center. After we drank coffee in a cafe, Starla took my hands. "Thank you, David," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "I really needed a distraction today. I'm glad you're my friend." When she left, I thought about her words. I was glad I had done something right after accidentally opening such a deep wound, and her words about me being her friend were reassuring. But I still wondered if I could ever be more than just a friend to her. For people in our profession, the calendar of the entertainment world is the main factor that determines our work. The next big thing is the announcement of the Emmy nominations. I didn't have to worry about the event itself. With announcements, everyone would be there covering the show. My assignment was to cover the subsequent parties, when the nominees would celebrate until they passed out, and those left without an award would drown in grief until they collapsed. You could always count on some celebrities getting into awkward situations, all of which were fodder for the paparazzi. Of course, I had no chance of getting into one of these parties, but no one could stop me from standing outside and taking random shots whenever the opportunity presented itself. I also knew from experience that the real movement did not begin with the arrival of the guests. The best shots were often obtained after the party was over. The big producer whose party I was assigned to cover had posted security, so I had no choice but to hang around the perimeter of his Beverly Hills mansion and make jokes with the other paparazzi about the parking attendants. It's a spectacle to watch some of the most expensive cars in the world being driven by teenagers with questionable driving skills. But I had an advantage that my competitors didn't. I wasn't afraid to climb. There was a royal palm tree across the street that seemed strong enough to support me, so I climbed up using the rigger's belt I'd brought with me. The tree swayed dangerously as I climbed, but once I reached the foliage and stopped climbing, it stabilized, giving me a good shooting position. The leaves hid me well, making me practically invisible from the ground, and most importantly, the height allowed me to look over the high fence surrounding the producer's property. Within a short time, I was able to identify and photograph several first-magnitude stars, some of which became completely uncontrollable as the night wore on. Then I noticed something strange. I was keeping an eye on the large heated pool when I saw a figure in a skimpy bikini emerge from the water and walk along the side of the house. This is Mickey Morningstar, I realized. What is she doing? There's nothing there except air conditioning. A minute later, I received an answer. Another man began sneaking around the house from the opposite side. My telephoto lens confirmed what I already suspected. It was Sal Minucci. As soon as they met, her bikini top came off and Sal happily began fondling her small but perky breasts. I happily clicked the frames. "Now I have you in my hands, you bastard," I rejoiced with myself. Then, putting away the camera, I carefully descended from the palm tree with the precious photographs. Things were definitely looking up. I had just put my camera in the car and was about to drive home when I noticed a familiar figure stumble out of the producer's mansion and walk unsteadily towards the valet counter. "Get my damn car, you pimply bastard," an aggressive Jinx McClure shouted at the poor boy. She was clearly drunk, or high, or both. The valet's lips curled in contempt at Jinx's words and her drunken appearance, but he still ran after her car. While he did this, Jinx staggered across the lawn behind the fence, barely able to stand on her feet. When the valet arrived with her shiny white Ferrari FF, she tripped on her heels and fell on her butt, revealing to everyone present that she had nothing under her skirt. She stopped to take off her shoes and throw them towards the unfortunate guy, then could barely stand up. I didn't have much sympathy for Jinx McClure, but my conscience wouldn't let me just stand by and watch her kill herself or anyone else. I walked up to the guy and grabbed his hand. "Hey, you can't give her the keys, man. She's drunk as hell, there's no chance she'll be able to drive." He looked at me with uncertainty. At this point, Jinx screamed, "Give me the keys, you stupid idiot. Don't you know who I am?" With that, the valet turned to me and said coldly, "Miss McClure doesn't look drunk to me," and handed the keys to her. "You are signing her death warrant," I shouted to him. As he continued to hold the keys, I snatched them from his hands before Jinx could reach them. "Get in the car," I shouted to her and directed her towards the passenger door. She was so drunk that she obediently allowed me to fasten her seat belt. I walked around the car and got behind the wheel. The parking attendant looked at me with a smile. "What about my tip?" he asked. "Don't drink and don't drive," I shouted and raised the window in front of his nose. He gave me the middle finger as I started the engine, and the Ferrari took off into the street. I've never driven a car with so much power. I knew I had to be careful. Jinx sat limply in her seat, her head moving limply from side to side. "Hey," she said after some time, "I know you. You're that photographer." "Correct," I said tensely. "David Cowan at your service." "You were in the store when I got caught stealing," she muttered. "That's right," I answered her. "It was me." "It's okay," she said. "It was good publicity. My agent said so." I didn't see the point in talking to a drunk person, so I concentrated on driving through the streets of Beverly Hills. I didn't need a map to find Jinx's house. Any paparazzi knows where the stars live. "You're a good guy," she muttered. Then she fell on me and started fiddling with my fly. "Hey, stop it, Jinx," I shouted. "I'm trying to drive." "I just want to please you," she muttered. Great, that's all I needed, I thought. I pushed her away and concentrated on driving. We were almost at her house. When I stopped at the curb in front of her luxurious home, I ran around the car to help her out. But when I opened the passenger door, I saw that she had passed out, her head falling limply onto her ample chest. When I unfastened her seat belt, I suddenly realized that she was not breathing. "Oh, damn," I swore. "Don't do this to me, Jinx." I quickly pulled her out of the car and laid her on her back on the lawn. I hit her in the face, hoping the shock would bring her to her senses, but it had no effect. I vaguely remembered my first aid training at Scout Camp. Of course, it was many years ago, but I decided that doing something was better than doing nothing, and began doing chest compressions, periodically stopping to pinch her nose and blow air into her mouth. As I continued to alternate between a series of compressions and artificial respiration, I began screaming at the top of my voice for help. The lights came on, and an elderly woman, whom I did not recognize, came out onto the porch in a robe. "What's going on here?" she asked. "Call 911, I shouted. "She's not breathing." The woman hurried back into the house while I continued alternating compressions with artificial respiration. I was just blowing air into Jinx's mouth once again when I felt her shudder convulsively. Suddenly, she vomited right into my mouth, and I turned away and began to vomit furiously. Luckily, I didn't lose my composure and rolled her onto her side so her vomit could clear her airway. As we both lay on the grass, choking, I heard a siren blaring from behind. The rescuers got to us quickly, and once they were sure I didn't need help, they focused on Jinx. In a matter of seconds, they loaded her into an ambulance and rushed to the hospital. I was left on my hands and knees, my stomach aching from vomiting, my mouth tasting of stomach acid and Thai food. As the adrenaline left my system, I began to shake. The woman returned to the street and stood over me. "Who are you?" she asked. "Nobody," I replied, "just the guy who gave her a ride home." She bent down, picked up the keys to the Ferrari, and headed back into the house. "Wait," I called after her. "I need these keys to get back to my car." She looked at me like I was an insect. "Take a taxi," she said, and returned to the porch. This made me angry. "Are you her mother?" I shouted, and she nodded briefly. "Well, obviously you raised your daughter well," I said sarcastically. "I'm sure you should be proud of her." She just snorted and slammed the door behind her. I reached for my phone to call a taxi, but found that there was none. I looked around Jinx's yard, as well as the sidewalk and curb, but couldn't find him. Goodbye, taxi, I thought with a feeling of doom. I sighed and started walking back towards the party. At least I still had my car keys. When I finally returned to my apartment, dawn came and I quietly opened the door. I was exhausted, my legs hurt, and my clothes smelled like vomit. I took everything off, threw it in the trash, and fell into bed. The next thing I heard was the phone ringing and Starla's voice. "David, where are you? Everyone is looking for your photos from the Emmys." I sat down sleepily. "Sorry, I'm late. You wouldn't believe the kind of night I had," I said. "But I took good pictures. Give me a few minutes and I'll be there." I showered as quickly as possible, got dressed, and headed to the office. On the way, I thought about everything that happened at the after party. My adventure with Jinx was quite unpleasant and cost me a lost phone and a sleepless night, but at least I did the right thing. Besides, I reminded myself the shots I took of Mickey and Sal made everything else worth it. Starla was delighted when she saw the photos I took at the party. When beautiful people think they are safe behind the walls, they relax and act just as stupid as everyone else, as many of my images demonstrated. Party arrival shots are good, but these high-up shots will be the real hits, Starla concluded. She opened a photo of Jinx McClure getting out of her white Ferrari. "I see your old friend showed up too," she said with a wink. "Have you heard the news about her?" When I shook my head, she continued, "Her agent told me this morning that she checked into rehab. Filming for her show has been suspended indefinitely." I felt relieved. At least she survived. I looked at Starla without expression. "I'm glad to hear it. This girl has been out of control for a long time. Perhaps this is just what she needs." "Yes, perhaps," Starla answered cynically, "if this is not just another PR stunt." I shook my head. She was right. In this city, it is difficult to understand what is real and what is just a game. Then I showed Starla the crown jewel of the collection, my pictures of Mickey pleasuring Sal. She looked at me with a mixture of admiration and excitement. "I knew you could do it. We've got him on the hook now, David. We'll make him squeal like a pig." I chuckled. "So what do we do next? Send some pictures to Sal's boss?" "Oh no," she said. "Now we sit and wait for the right moment. We want Sal's fake story about breaking up with Mickey and reconciling to play out first. But don't rush," she added, noticing how I frowned. "When the time comes, there will be no salvation for him." Ever since I learned about Starla's story in college, I've been deliberately careful with her. The last thing I wanted was to do anything that would upset her even more. But since her revelation, I have noticed a significant improvement in her mood. She seemed much more relaxed and happy, and several times I noticed her smiling to herself and humming tunes as she walked around the office. All of this made me think that now might be the right time to try to take our friendship to the next level. After several failed attempts where I lacked the courage, I saw my chance late one evening when we were working together in her office, and she was literally beaming. "You've been in a really good mood lately," I said, trying to steer the conversation away from work. "What's going on?" She literally blushed. "I didn't think it was so obvious," she said. Then she gave me her wonderful smile. "But there is a reason, and I want you to be the first to know. I'm engaged." With that, she raised her left hand to show me her engagement ring. I was stunned. It was a punch in the gut. But she was smiling and waiting for me to say something, so I barely managed to say, "Congratulations, Starla. This is a real surprise. I didn't even know you were dating someone." She giggled. "We've been keeping it a secret, but last night we decided it was time to tell everyone." She then looked at the door and her smile grew even wider. "Oh great, here comes my fiancé." I turned in my chair and stood up when an attractive woman in a dark business suit entered the room. She immediately walked up to Starla, hugged her, and kissed her passionately while I stood there with my mouth open. Starla blushed again and then turned to me. "David, I would like to introduce you to my fiancée, Hannah Mortensen. Hannah, this is my good friend and colleague David Cowan. The woman reached out her hand and shook mine firmly. She said something about how she had heard a lot about me, but there was such a noise in my ears that I could barely make out anything. I just smiled as best I could and nodded my head. After a couple of minutes, Starla spoke up. Hannah is taking me to a women's rights rally, so we're going to leave a little early. See you tomorrow, David. With these words, they walked out holding hands. I sank back into my chair, stunned. When I left work after finding out about Starla's engagement, I decided to go to Mulholland Drive again. If ever I needed to think things through, now was the moment. As I watched dusk fall over the city, I tried to get my emotions under control. I know we never met or anything, but it seemed to me that there was something more between us than just friendship, I thought bitterly. Then I remembered what Starla said when Kelly left. Everyone in this town plays a role. She seemed to include herself in this. I can't believe she likes women, I exclaimed in anger, but then I remembered what happened to Starla in college and felt guilty. I couldn't blame her for not wanting to deal with men, not after something like that. No wonder she was drawn to women. Not all men are like those animals, I objected to myself, but I understood that this was just a rationalization. If Starla is gay, that's just the way it is, and I'll have to live with it, I told myself. But I still felt bad, and, to be honest, I was jealous of Hannah. Later, as I drove home in the dark, my only consolation was that I hadn't tried to ask Starla out. That would be really humiliating, I thought. The next day, feeling very awkward, I forced myself to look into Starla's office. I still wanted to maintain our friendship, even though it was now a source of pain. Listen, I said, I'm sorry I was so distracted yesterday when you told me about you and Hannah. I'm really happy for you. You just caught me off guard. I understand, she apologized. I should have said something sooner. It just happened so fast that I didn't have a chance. It's okay, I assured her. I'm just glad you finally found your white knight, so she'll take you away from all this California fuss. For a moment, Starla's face lost its smile. Oh, that was just my romantic or naive idea. No, Hannah is a lawyer who has already made a name for herself on women's rights issues. In fact, people are already starting to mention her name in the context of a possible political career here in California, and I know she has ambitions in that direction. Considering all this, I think I will stay here for a long time. I felt embarrassed that my careless remark made her feel uncomfortable. Hey, that's great, I said quickly. The main thing is that you are happy, and that's the only thing that matters. She smiled gratefully. Thank you, David. It means a lot to me. She then looked down at the papers on her desk. Hey, I have a new task. Do you want to take it? It will be a piece of cake for you. The idea of doing something that would distract me from my personal life, or rather lack thereof, sounded good. One of the major weeklies wants to create a section, Where Are They Now? They have quite a long list of names, but all it takes is a little research. It was a classic format. From time to time, publications like to feature stories about celebrities and other personalities who were once popular, but then disappeared from view. Fans love finding out what happened to their old favorites and what they're up to now. This quest won't be as difficult as some, but it will take time and effort to find everyone. It would allow me to get out of the office and take my mind off Starla, so I decided to take it on. For many of the former celebrities on the list, my task was no more difficult than contacting their former agents. Many agents stayed in touch with their old clients, and most of the clients were glad to be back in the spotlight, even if only for a short time. But some seemed content to leave the past behind them, and it took a little searching for them. I found a former soap opera star who had moved to Encino and now owned a small organic farm. She didn't really want to remember her past, but I managed to get some good pictures of her working in her fields. But there was one guy, a former rock musician named Billy Badley, who seemed to disappear completely from the radar. He had several big hits in the early 90s, as well as several run-ins with the law. But unlike many others who clung to their former glory with endless shows and reunion tours, Billy simply disappeared from the scene, severed all ties with his label and agent, and went into obscurity. I assumed that Billy Badley was not his real name, and an old issue of Rolling Stone magazine revealed that he was born William Atkinson. I used this name to check the tax records and found 7 William Atkinsons who owned property in or near Los Angeles. What luck, I thought sarcastically as I went to check on each of them. The next day, I managed to eliminate 5 Atkinsons from my list, but the last 2 lived on the other side of town. The next day, I reluctantly went to the next address, which was somewhere in Topanga Canyon. I drove my old Toyota west on Highway 10, turned onto the Pacific Coast Highway, and then headed north on Highway 27. That's where things started to get interesting. When I got to Topanga, I thought I had found the right turn, but soon found myself on a series of steep switchbacks along the slope. I was about to turn around and go back when, rounding another blind turn, I saw a frightening sight. The small pickup truck appeared to lose control on the loose gravel and spun out. Its rear wheels were now hanging over the edge of the canyon. The panicked driver continued to press the gas, spinning the wheels in a futile attempt to get back on the road. I pulled over to the side of the road and ran to the pickup truck. The woman behind the wheel held onto the steering wheel like a life preserver, her eyes wide. "Get out of the car," I shouted, but she didn't move. "You need to get out," I shouted again, "otherwise the car will fall down." But she continued to sit and press on the gas pedal. In desperation, I jerked the door open and grabbed her hand. "Come on," I shouted, and this time she looked at me with a surprised expression, as if she couldn't understand how I could stand there. I pulled her hand harder, and she suddenly let go of the steering wheel, so I pulled her to the ground, falling with her. I jumped to my feet and helped her up, trying to get us both away from the car, which was leaning dangerously now that the front seat was free of weight. But instead of retreating to safety, she again headed towards the truck, which was now rocking even more. "No, stay away from the car," I said, trying to pull her aside, but she screamed, "My baby," and I gasped in horror. I grabbed her by the shoulders and held her in place. "Wait here," I ordered, and then rushed to the cab of the truck, desperately searching for the baby. I saw no child seat, bassinet, or other signs that there was a child in the car, but then I noticed a white shadow on the passenger seat. It was a small dog. "You're going to die," I thought, throwing myself across the front seat and grabbing the frightened animal. It bit me, but I managed to grab it by the collar and jerk it out. Then I hurriedly climbed out of the cab and collapsed onto the asphalt, just as the truck began to slide inexorably down the side of the canyon. The open door must have passed just inches from my face as I lay on my back. I lay there for a minute, trembling from the horror I had experienced. The woman seemed to have come to her senses. She came up to me and snatched the dog from my hands. "Oh, baby, are you okay? You scared me so much," she said while the dog licked her face with obvious pleasure. Finally, I sat down, and the woman seemed to notice me for the first time. "Geez, mister, are you okay?" I nodded, getting to my feet, and she came over to me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and started showering me with kisses. "You saved baby," she exclaimed in awe. "He could have died." I gently pushed her away to dust off my pants. You too could die, I thought, and so would I, for that matter. But I kept these thoughts to myself, not wanting to send her into a state of panic again. "Listen," I said, looking down into the ravine, "we can't get your pickup out without a tow truck, if it's even repairable. Do you live nearby? I can give you a ride." Her face immediately darkened, and I thought she was going to cry. "Oh God, Billy will be so mad at me." "It's okay," I tried to reassure her. "It was an accident. There was nothing you could do." "No, I couldn't," she sobbed. "It's not my fault." This thought seemed to lift her spirits a little, and when I again offered to drive her home, she agreed. As she directed me along the steep, winding roads, I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. Now that the accident was behind me, I could see that she was probably around 30 years old and very attractive. She was wearing a t-shirt that did nothing to hide the size of her breasts. Shorts and flip-flops were her only other clothing. I realized that my luck was even better than I thought when I avoided falling off a cliff. She introduced herself as Bitsy Baker, and when I said I was David Cowan, she smiled and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, David." I asked what she did, and she said, "Oh, I work as a housekeeper for Billy Badley." As soon as she said this, she immediately covered her mouth with her hands and looked at me with a feeling of guilt. Oh no, I shouldn't have said that. Billy made me swear that I would never tell strangers about him or where he lived. Then she looked at me and relaxed a little. "But you saved baby's life, and now you're taking me home, so I guess you're not a stranger, right?" I smiled and assured her that we were old friends now. Moreover, I was once a big fan of Billy, I admitted honestly. "So how did you become his housekeeper?" "I was a fan," she replied lightheartedly. "I went to all his concerts, slept with him and everything, and then he just took me with him wherever he went. When he left the band and bought this house in Topanga, he brought me with him." When she said, "this house," she pointed to a gravel road that led through a thicket of bushes. I turned where she indicated, and as soon as we rounded the low hill, we stopped in front of the gate. Bitsy jumped out of the car, entered the combination, and the gate slowly opened to let us in. I didn't see a mailbox or any other signs that there was anything else there, but as we drove around the hill, I saw a large house with several smaller buildings around it. She pointed me to a small hut on the edge of this settlement. "That's where I live," she said cheerfully. I looked at the big house, and she caught my eye. "This is Billy's house," she explained. "I clean it every time he leaves, or when he's home and wants." She hesitated, but then just finished. "Well, whenever he wants." "I see," I replied cautiously. "So maybe we should go and tell Billy what happened to the pickup, and that you're okay." "We can't do this," she said. "He left again with friends in Mexico and will not return until after dark. They go there all the time. I think Billy has some friends in Tijuana or something. I'm alone here, but I'm already used to it." She smiled at me. "Would you like to come over for a cup of coffee?" "Of course," I replied, hoping to learn more about Billy's life after leaving the music scene. Bitsy's cabin was cozy but quite nice. While she was making coffee, I took the opportunity to look out the window at the rest of the buildings. In addition to the main house, there was a large detached garage, as well as a building that appeared to have been used as a warehouse. Now that I looked more closely, I noticed that the entire area was surrounded by a tall chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, and there were CCTV cameras mounted on several posts. Very interesting, I thought to myself. Billy seems to really value his privacy. Before I could even think of that thought, I heard Bitsy clear her throat behind me, and when I turned around, my breath caught in my throat. While I was looking around, she managed to completely undress, and now stood in front of me in all her nakedness. I was not mistaken about her breasts. They were a real work of art, high, firm, and full. Slowly scanning her body with my eyes, I realized that housework apparently gave her enough physical exercise. "I really didn't thank you properly for saving baby's life," she purred with that thin smile that women have when they know they have a man in their arms. "Bitsy, you don't have to." I started to protest, but she stepped forward and put her fingers to my lips. "But I want," she said. "I really want. I haven't been with a man for so long." Then her fingers began to unbutton my shirt, and once she had that done, she quickly rid me of my pants, shoes, and underwear. She then pushed me towards the sofa, and I sat where she wanted me to sit. The fact that I hadn't had sex since Kelly left, plus Bitsy's obvious arousal, brought me to a state I'd never experienced before. We lay there for several minutes until I rolled to the side. She pulled me towards her and gave me a sweet kiss. "Oh wow, David," she said, "that was amazing. I don't think anyone has ever been so passionate about me. I really needed this." Then, to my surprise, she came over, picked up her dog, brought it to me, and let it lick my face several times. "Baby also wants to thank a good man," she said in a childish voice. I wasn't much of a dog person, but I told myself I was willing to put up with a few dog kisses just so Bitsy could show her gratitude again. After making sure Bitsy was okay and advising her to contact her insurance company about her car, I headed back home. As I left, I made careful mental notes of the area and route to Billy Canyon because I planned to return the next day when Billy was supposed to be home. The next morning, I stopped by the office to give Starla the rest of the photos I had already taken for the Where Are They Now article. When she asked about Billy, I decided not to tell her all the details about my adventure with Bitsy yesterday, but I told her that I was able to find where Billy lives and hoped to get pictures of him in the future treatment. She nodded and then pulled out the latest issue of a popular celebrity magazine. I thought you might be interested in looking at the preview issue, since it contains your work, she said with a smile. Of course, the cover featured one of my shots of Mickey Morningstar hugging the bad guy she's supposed to be having an affair with. I opened the article, and there, in breathtaking style, was Sal's fictional account of their affair. I thought about what was really happening and chuckled. Starla watched my face carefully, and when I laughed, she said, "I knew it would make you smile." "So when are we going to release those pictures I took of Mickey and Sal?" I asked her. "We need to wait until the second part of Sal's little fictional story comes out," she advised. "The truth will have its greatest impact then." I smiled. This will really be impressive. Over dinner, we continued to discuss the surprise Starla was planning for Sal and Kelly. Just as I had hoped, Starla knew how to do everything for maximum effect. At first, I was full of enthusiasm, but as the conversation progressed, my enthusiasm began to subside. The problem was that I couldn't help but think about Starla. Watching and listening to her, I couldn't stop wishing things were different. I knew she preferred women, and I had to accept that nothing would happen between us. But the truth didn't make her any less attractive to me. I felt like the mythical Tantalus who is always hungry for the fruits hanging above him, but cannot reach them. Being around Starla was painful, and like Tantalus, I couldn't shake the pain. "So, how are things going with Hannah?" I asked, trying to sound as casual as possible. "Of course, it's all right," she replied sharply. "Why should it be different?" "No reason," I quickly replied. "Just keeping the conversation going." Her shoulders relaxed a little. "Sorry for running into you," she apologized. "It's just that Hannah seems to want me to go to every meeting and rally she goes to, and it's a little stressful considering everything that's going on at work and beyond." "Of course I understand," I assured her. I mentally blamed myself for causing her stress again. It seems that brides always have a lot of worries before their wedding that men cannot understand. I vowed to myself not to bring up the topic again and left her office as quickly as possible. I decided to head back to Topanga Canyon after lunch. Most celebrities aren't morning people, and I didn't want to start by waking Billy up. As I drove, my thoughts kept returning to his domain. It's not uncommon for celebrities to want to protect their privacy, but with Billy it seemed excessive. Something is wrong here. So when I approached the canyon, I stopped 100 meters from the entrance to Billy's property. From there, I crossed the field, trying to stay behind the hill to hide from view. When I got to the top of the hill, I lay down in the grass and bushes and used my telephoto lens to try to see what was going on there. I first pointed the camera at Bitsy's hut, but there was no activity there. Then I turned the lens to the main building. A large SUV was now parked next to the house. As I shifted my focus, I noticed two vans parked in front of the garage. As I watched, several men were unloading bundles from vans and moving them into the storage area I had noticed earlier. Then another person appeared. He seemed to be leading the others, but what really struck me was that he was holding what looked like an assault rifle. I continued to take pictures, wondering what Billy had gotten himself into. Suddenly, I felt someone's knee hit hard between my shoulder blades, pinning me to the ground and knocking the air out of me. Lying on the ground, gasping for breath, I felt the barrel of a gun against my ear. "Okay, asshole, shut up and crawl back," a rough voice said, and I hastened to obey as soon as I could breathe again. As I reached the crest of the hill, a hand grabbed me by the shoulder and roughly turned me over. A large man stood in front of me with an automatic pistol pointed at my chest. "Who the hell are you, and what are you doing here with this camera?" he demanded. I reached for my wallet, but the barrel of a gun in my face stopped me. "I'm just getting my ID," I assured him, and slowly took my wallet out of my back pocket. All this time, his eyes were carefully watching me so that I would not make a single wrong move. He carefully took my wallet, then stepped back and looked at the ID the photo agency had provided me with. A minute later, he took the phone from his belt and pressed the button. "Hey, Jim, I have a spy here." "Accepted," a voice sounded from the speaker, and a few minutes later, a second figure ran up the hill. This guy was wearing a dark blue windbreaker with the letters D emblazoned across the chest. The first man used a plastic zip tie to handcuff me, and then the two of them led me down the hill to a ravine where a car I had not noticed was parked. They threw me in the back seat, took my wallet, and walked away to make some calls. Sitting there in an awkward position, it didn't take much imagination for me to figure out what was going on here. Billy badly appears to have switched from rock and roll to trafficking illegal substances as a way to finance his lifestyle. That explained why he had so many guards on the property and why he traveled to Mexico so often, I thought. I couldn't help but laugh ironically. If I'm not mistaken, then the answer to the question, "Where are they now?" for Billy was probably in federal prison. At that moment, one of the agents returned to the car, opened the door, and pulled me out. Taking a folding knife from his pocket, he cut the plastic handcuffs on my wrists. Then he turned to face me. "Okay, Mr. Cowan, your story has been confirmed, and you are free. But I advise you to leave the area immediately. This is not the place you want to be." "Yes," said another agent, "especially tonight." The first agent turned sharply to glare at his partner, who looked quite ashamed. I didn't want to get involved in their little argument, and quickly assured them that I would leave as soon as I got to my car. They watched me carefully as I walked down the slope and along the road to where I had parked. In the rear mirror, I saw them still looking at me as I drove away. I realized that I was heading to the city of Topanga, and when I noticed a cafe, I turned there to let the adrenaline subside a little. I didn't like having a gun shoved in my face. It wasn't part of the job description, I thought, and I really didn't want to be anywhere near Billy's house tonight. Apparently, the Substance Enforcement Administration was planning a raid on his property, and I wanted to be far away from there, especially since the people inside seemed to be heavily armed. Damn, I thought. One minute you're trying to take a photo for a soft subject, and the next you find yourself in the middle of a big taboo business. I remembered how this whole mess started, and suddenly I straightened up. Damn, I completely forgot about Bitsy. Part of me argued that she had made her choice, and I shouldn't interfere with it. But another part knew that poor, stupid Bitsy most likely had no idea what she was getting herself into. They might kill her if I don't warn her, I thought. It hurts to have a conscience. I didn't really owe anything to Bitsy, but I still felt responsible for her. If it was worth getting her out of the truck, I told myself, then I should try to get her out before the shooting started around her. Damn, damn, damn. Finally, I made a decision. It was already late, and the canyons and ravines accelerated the onset of darkness. When I felt the light had dimmed enough to provide me with cover, I headed back down the highway to Billy's house, cursing myself for being a fool with every kilometer I passed. This time I parked even further away so I could start walking. I knew I had to stay low and out of sight, but at the same time, if I didn't hurry, I might arrive too late. Finally, I noticed a dry creek bed that I remembered from a previous visit. I hoped it would provide enough cover for me to approach the complex undetected by both the agents and Billy's men. Equally important, I noticed that at one time, perhaps during the rainy season, a stream had eroded the fence line, leaving a gap. Now I thought I could crawl under it to get into the territory. By the time I got under the fence, the temperature had dropped significantly, and I felt myself starting to shiver. Or maybe it's just fear, I thought. Anyway, I continued to sneak up to Bitsy's little house, hoping that the agency would concentrate on the main house, and there would be no guards around. I crawled the last 20 yards to Bitsy's house and knocked softly on the door from my knees. When it opened, I hurriedly climbed inside and quickly closed the door behind me. "Bitsy," I said tensely, "you need to get out of here now." She just stared at me. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Billy was so angry when he found out you were here yesterday. I don't know what he'll do if he catches you here now." I looked at her and suddenly realized that her left eye was bruised. "Bastard," I began to curse, but before I could say anything, the door behind me swung open, and the largest Latino I had ever seen burst inside with an assault rifle. "Who are you, damn gringo?" he shouted, and Bitsy screamed softly in fear. I slowly raised my hands to show that I was unarmed and said, "Hey, I'm just Bitsy's friend who came to see her." "How the hell did you get through the gate?" he demanded. But before I could answer, screams came from outside. Suddenly, a powerful spotlight illuminated the camp, and we heard an ominous amplified voice through the loudspeaker. "This is the US department. We have surrounded you. Come out with your hands up, and nothing will happen to you." For a second, there was absolute silence, and then there was a hail of bullets, and in the darkness, where the spotlight did not reach, it was possible to see flashes of gunfire. A large Hispanic man walked up to the window and broke several panes with the butt of his rifle. "Damn feds," he shouted at the top of his lungs and began to shoot from his weapon, apparently trying to shoot down the searchlight. I turned to Bitsy. "Get down," I shouted, trying to throw her to the floor, but she resisted me. "Where is baby?" she screamed. "I have to find baby." I grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her back, just as a volley of gunfire ripped through the bungalow. I turned to see what happened, and what felt like a baseball bat hit me in the head. I fell on Bitsy and lost consciousness. When I came to my senses, I could not move my arms or legs. "Where am I?" I asked in a voice that sounded more like a wheeze than the scream I was expecting. A hand squeezed my shoulder. "You are strapped to a stretcher in the ambulance," the voice said soothingly. "You are being taken to Woodland Hills Hospital." I think this means that I haven't died yet, I thought, and again plunged into unconsciousness. The next time I woke up, the light was so bright that it hurt my eyes. But there was little I could do as the doctor in his scrubs pulled back my eyelids and carefully examined my pupils. Finally, he released me and began making notes on the medical record. "Where am I?" I asked, having difficulty thinking. "What happened?" He looked at his card again and then looked at me with a strange look. "I hope you bought a lottery ticket today," he said, "because you are definitely the luckiest person I have ever met." I looked at him like he was crazy. "I don't understand," I said. "What happened?" He became more serious. "What happened, Mr. Cowan, was that you were shot in the head with a 9x19 parabellum pistol. Luckily for you, before the bullet hit you, it was slowed down significantly by the sternum of the man who was holding you hostage. The same bullet then shattered his fourth rib, losing almost all of his remaining momentum before ricocheting into your forehead." He shook his head. "I don't know many people who have survived a head wound like this, Mr. Cowan, so I would advise you to buy this lottery ticket right now." He probably thought he was witty, but I wasn't in the mood for humor. "My head hurts terribly," I told him. "That's normal," he answered calmly. "You have a slight concussion. We'll keep you here overnight for observation, but as far as I can tell, you'll be able to go home tomorrow. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on the condition of other patients who were much less fortunate than you." Hospitals are still as unpleasant places as ever, and I was glad when I was discharged the next morning. I took a taxi to my car and was pleasantly surprised to find it in the same place where I had left it the night before. When I started driving back to Los Angeles, my head still hurt, but the painkillers they gave me took the edge off. On the track, I thought about what happened. "That was the stupidest thing you've ever done," I chastised myself sternly. "What made you come back for?" As soon as this thought occurred to me, I realized that I did not know what happened to Bitsy. Once I got to the office, I sat down at my desk and called the hospital, but there was no one there by that name. I then tried calling my local office, but only got an answer from an automated system, and none of the voice options were helpful. I sat on the line for 15 minutes waiting for one of our representatives to answer. Finally, I gave in. All I could do was hope Bitsy was okay. I took my camera bag and went to Starla. "Oh my God, David, I'm so glad you're okay," she exclaimed when I entered her office. "I've been trying to call you all morning." She walked around the table and hugged me. I felt a slight dizziness. Apparently, these were the consequences of a concussion. "Thank God you didn't find Billy badly," she said excitedly. "I heard on the news that the D raided his house last night and there was a shootout. Billy was killed, as were several other people. I was overcome with fear." "Did they say who else was killed?" I asked. "Was there a woman among them? Did they mention the name Bitsy Baker?" "No," she said, looking at me with a strange look. "Who is Bitsy Baker, and how do you know her?" Before she could ask any more questions, she noticed the bandage on my forehead. "What happened to you, David? Are you hurt? Are you okay?" "Actually, I found Billy," I replied and sat down to explain that Bitsy was Billy's housekeeper, and she showed me the way to his property. "I came back yesterday to try and take photos because Billy was away. I purposely left out the details of the raid and how I hurt my head because I didn't want her to know how stupid I was." Before she could ask any more questions, I tried to distract her. "Hey, do you think there'll be a market for pictures of Billy's homestead?" I asked innocently. With that, I pulled out my camera and showed Starla the photos I had taken from the top of the hill. "They are simply amazing," she said with admiration. "Let me start calling right away." With these words, she grabbed the phone, and I quickly walked out the door. Although my head still hurt, I felt that pleasing Starla was worth all the trouble of being injured. When I finished work that day, I planned to go to bed early because I was exhausted from the previous night's adventure. But somehow I ended up back on Mulholland Drive. As I sat there and watched the twinkling lights of the city, I felt myself begin to tremble. I knew what was happening, a delayed reaction to the death experience, and it got me thinking. Why are you still in this city? I asked myself. You hate this job. You hate this crazy world of illusions in which you don't fit in, and where there is nothing and no one to hold you back. Well, there was. No, I told myself, don't think about it. The next day, when I came to work, Starla was beaming. "Looks like you got lucky with those photos of Billy's property," I said when I saw how excited she was. Instead of answering, she turned to her computer and opened the website. "You're absolutely golden, David," she exclaimed. "Look at this." As she pulled her chair aside, I saw one of my photographs of Billy's possessions on the front page of the newspaper. I checked the name of the newspaper. It was the New York Times. "You beat everyone," she said triumphantly. "We sold your photographs to the Associated Press, and now every newspaper and TV channel in the country publish them." She smiled slyly. "If we're not careful, our agency risks becoming legitimate." After we looked at other news sites that published my photos, she took on a more thoughtful expression. "I have another piece of good news for you. Some people I know say that Phase 2 of Sal Minucci's Mickey Morningstar campaign will begin this week. Once that happens, it will be the perfect time for your little reveal." She looked at me carefully. "I know you want to get even with Sal, but if I'm not mistaken, the retaliation could also affect Kelly. Are you sure you want this? There is another way to proceed. You don't have to create Sodom and Gomorrah, you just have to show Kelly the photos. This should end her relationship with Sal, and she may be willing to give you another chance if that's what you're interested in." "No," I said without hesitation. "She made her choice, and her choice has consequences." Starla nodded thoughtfully. "I agree, David. I just felt like I had to check it out." "Leave it all to me." 2 days later, Starla had a copy of the weekly celebrity magazine on her desk. A 2-page cover photograph illustrated the article and depicted Mickey Morningstar cuddling with her old boyfriend under the headline, "Reunited, All is Forgiven." The article talked about how Mickey regretted her crush on another man, how she felt she had let her fans down, not to mention her boyfriend, and how she had learned from her mistake. "I have learned so much from this entire experience," she was quoted as saying, "and I am going to dedicate myself to making our love stronger than ever." The online version of the magazine even included a survey that Mickey fans could take. According to the current account, the vast majority forgave her for her transgression and welcomed her back to her boyfriend. Starla was on edge. I know the head of programming at the channel who hosts the Mickey show. I think he'll be very interested in the photos you took of Mickey and Sal. She gave me a smile that was downright evil. Now we have them, she said with such pleasure that I involuntarily winced. As I learned later that day, wincing was the least of what happened after Starla sent the network some of my best pictures from both the cottage and the Emmy party. Starla sweetly explained to them that she was going to offer the photos to the highest bidder. When the network executive saw the photos, he almost had a heart attack. After hasty consultations with the network's president and their legal department, the programming executive called Starla back to offer her a small fortune in exchange for exclusive rights to the photographs. Of course, they'll destroy them right away, she told me with an evil grin, because they know that if these pictures get into print, it will be the death sentence for Mickey's career. Fans don't like being lied to, and once they turn away, there's little chance of getting them back. If people found out that Mickey's reconciliation with her boyfriend was a hoax, the network would have to cancel her show mid-season. It would be a financial ruin, she explained with delight. But what about Sal and Kelly? I was indignant. Oh, I just started, she said again with that evil grin. After the channel dealt with the incriminating photos, their next step was to call the head of the agency, Sal, on the carpet. I was told that the president of the TV channel threatened to never use clients from this agency again. The president of the agency literally got down on his knees, begging for forgiveness and promising to make things right if they gave them another chance. My source said that as soon as the president returned to the agency, he called Sal into his office, showed him incriminating photographs, and accused him of almost destroying the agency. With the evidence in front of him, Sal couldn't deny that he had acted recklessly and inappropriately. As a result, Sal was fired on the spot and told that he could leave town immediately because he would never find work in Hollywood again. Starla leaned back in her chair. After Sal was fired, the agency president called Kelly and accused her of conspiring with you, she pointed at me, to get these photos. He was sure that someone must have warned you, and Kelly was the most likely suspect. Kelly swore she wasn't, but when she had to admit that you and she were still legally married, her fate was sealed. She was also fired, and now let her try to find a job in this city with such a track record, Starla said with a grin. Oh, she added, and in case you were wondering, Sal also believes that Kelly turned him into you out of jealousy over Mickey, so now they're broken up too. I smiled at her with admiration and gratitude. Wow, this is full payback. You're the best, Starla, I told her. Now I think I can send the signed divorce papers by mail. I returned to my cubicle, feeling pleased with how things had turned out. They both got what they deserved, and they did it to themselves. All I did was reveal the truth. They made their choice, and choices have consequences. As I sat and pondered, my cell phone rang, and when I answered, there was a voice I didn't recognize. David, this is John Kirby. I am the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at SUNY. I don't want to upset you, but your father suffered a stroke and is not expected to live long. You need to come as soon as possible if you want to see him. Starla smiled when I entered her office, but when she saw the expression on my face, she became alarmed and ran towards me. David, what happened? What's wrong? This is my dad, I answered sadly. He is dying. The closest major airport to SUNY is in Nashville, and it's a long flight from Los Angeles, especially with a layover in Dallas. In addition to the flight time, I lost another 2 hours because I was flying east. It was therefore quite late when I landed. However, I immediately rented a car and drove to SUNY, 95 miles away. The dean told me that my father fell at the end of the lecture. That was good, I thought. He would like to finish the lesson. He was immediately taken to Emerald Hodgson Hospital. When I got there, visiting hours had already ended, but given the circumstances, they made an exception for me. The doctor warned me, but it was still a shock to see my father's motionless face lying there. Although he seemed to be sleeping, I took his hand and held it. "I'm here, Dad," I whispered in his ear, and it seemed to me that his grip tightened for a moment. I sat by his bedside, holding his hand, and after some time, I laid my head on the blanket next to his leg. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I felt was the nurse's fingers gently opening mine. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Cowan," she said. "He's gone." Memorial service Lasla, of course, in the Chapel of All Saints, and I was pleased to see that the temple was filled with students, teachers, and family friends. My father taught philosophy at the University of the South for over 30 years, and there were many people who wanted to say a few words about how he influenced their lives. There was no funeral because he told me a long time ago that he wanted to be cremated. "From dust we came, and to dust we will return," he said. When the service ended and the well-wishers had finally left, I took the urn containing his ashes and drove through Monteagle to Tracy City and on to Foster Falls. Standing at the top of the falls, I tilted the urn and let the ashes scatter across the rushing water of Gizzard Creek as it flowed into the foamy pool below. He wanted to be reunited with the lands and waters he had explored for many years, and it was comforting to carry out his last wishes. After that, I returned to Suwanee to the house where he lived for so many years. It was surrounded by an acre of land on the edge of a road leading into the forest. Even after Mom died, Dad managed to keep it amazingly neat and tidy, and I was glad he was able to spend his last days there rather than in some impersonal nursing home. I spent the next few days cleaning the house, throwing out old papers that no longer mattered, packing clothes for charity, mowing the lawn, and trimming the bushes. I wasn't planning on selling the house, but I didn't think I'd have a problem renting it out to professors or married graduate students. After learning all about weekends in Suwanee from my dad, I wanted to avoid renting out the house to students if possible. Returning to Suwanee was an interesting experience. I thought I would feel uncomfortable returning to my childhood home, but instead I felt relaxed and calm. Maybe it was the mountain air, but whatever it was, I slept better than I had in months. A few days later, Dean Kirby called and asked me to come to his office. I assumed that he had some personal belongings of my father that he would like to give to me, but I was wrong. "David," he said to me as I settled into a comfortable chair, "one of the Cohens has worked at this institute longer than I've been teaching here, and I would be unpleasant if this connection were interrupted. I was wondering if you would consider working at the university." I began to protest that I did not have the appropriate qualifications, but he interrupted me. "I've seen your publications in many publications," he said, pointing to a copy of the New York Times on his desk. "We offer several photography courses as part of our art and art history program, and we could use a guest lecturer with your experience who could give students a real sense of the profession. Additionally, our university photographer is retiring at the end of this semester, and we will need someone to take over her duties. Of course, the salary we can offer you won't compare to what you get in Los Angeles, but the cost of living in Suwanee, I think, is a little more reasonable," he added with a smile. "Wow," I said. "I didn't expect such an offer. Give me some time to think." "No problem," he said. "We don't need to know the answer for another month, and you won't actually start work until the 1st of August. But I really hope that you will seriously consider our proposal." I promised that I would think about it, and, leaving his office, I went for a walk around campus. The Gothic architecture seemed appropriate, making the university feel like a medieval enclave high above the neon and plastic world I'd been living in lately. As a child, I wanted to quickly leave for the lights of the big city. Now the tranquility of the campus and this beautiful little city seemed very attractive. That afternoon, I drove to Greens View to watch the sunset. Below, I could see fields crossed by rows of trees, rivers, ponds, and the occasional farmhouse, all stretching into the distance to the northwest. I couldn't help but notice how clear the view was. There was no brown haze in the air, as is often the case in Los Angeles. Why not do it? I asked myself. The house is now mine, and it is paid for. If I live there instead of renting it out, my expenses will be very small. More importantly, I will be far away from all the falsehood, inflated egos, and pretense that I hated so much. And if I go to work at a university, I will no longer be a parasite feeding on the illusions and dreams of other people, and I will not be ashamed to say what I do. When I thought about it, it turned out that if I left, I had little to lose. Of course, I'll miss the ocean and beaches, and I wasn't sure I'd be able to find good Thai food. And of course, there was Starla, but I had already lost her. Maybe we will still remain friends, just living in different cities, I thought. And perhaps it will be better this way. Being around her was still difficult for me. I forced myself to step away from this thought and think about the opportunities that moving would open up for me. Just a few weeks ago, I was complaining about my life and being stuck in a world I hated. Now I have a chance to break out of all this and start a completely new life. Don't be an idiot, take the chance. When I returned to my car, I noticed how quiet it was. This silence matched the peace I felt within myself. I must be making the right decision, I thought. The next morning, I called the dean. I don't have to think about it anymore, I told him. I would like to accept your generous offer. Now that I had made up my mind, my enthusiasm began to grow. There was a lot of work to be done to prepare for the coming changes, but it was all for the good. Everything was moving towards a new life. However, there was one task that I was very afraid to do, but now that I had made a decision, it could not be put off. So that afternoon, sitting on the screened-in porch of the house, I gathered my courage and called Starla. "David," she exclaimed, hearing my voice, "I thought so much about you. How are you? How was the farewell ceremony with your father?" I told her about the memorial service and how I scattered my father's ashes over the waterfall. She thought it was a beautiful way to send it off. Then her voice changed and she asked, "When will you be back, David? So much has happened while you were away, and there is so much I need to tell you." "I'm not coming back, Starla," I said. "Won't you come back?" "Never? I don't understand." "Well, I'll be back to get my things, but I've decided to stay in Suini." I continued to tell her about the dean's offer and my plan to change careers and live at my parents' house. She was silent for a long time while I enthusiastically talked about how glad I was to escape the Los Angeles lifestyle and escape the world of pop culture. There was a long silence, and I began to feel uneasy, and my monologue came to an end. Finally, Starla broke the silence. "David, I don't even know what to say. I'm really glad you found a new life. This sounds like something you've said so often, but the thought that you won't be here anymore." "I feel the same way," I said. "You are one of the few things in Los Angeles. That is the only thing I'll miss, really, Starla." And then, to my horror, I heard myself say, "You know, I've been in love with you for a long time." "About," she gasped, and I panicked. What came over me that I blurted out such a thing? True, of course, but I never intended to say it out loud. Before I said anything else to embarrass myself or completely ruin any chance of maintaining the friendship, I hastily added, "Look, I have to go. I'll send you an email to let you know when I'm back to pick up my things." Then I quickly hung up. "Damn, damn, damn," I scolded myself. "Now you've ruined everything. You'll never be able to talk to Starla again without feeling awkward and uncomfortable." My excitement about my new life faded, replaced by frustration at my impulsiveness. All I could do was try to forget this conversation and continue preparing for the move. Now that I had decided to move, there was a lot to consider before moving back to Los Angeles. After thinking about it, I decided that I would send everything I needed back to the East. This will allow me to book a one-way ticket and then travel back in my Toyota. I wasn't sure that the old unit would last, but I didn't care. I was planning on buying a new car anyway. If the Toyota breaks down, I'll just buy a replacement down the road. The flight to Los Angeles was tiring. Strong headwinds meant we arrived later than planned. Even though I had gained 2 hours from the time difference, I was still exhausted when I landed in Los Angeles. After picking up my Toyota from the long-term parking lot, I went to my apartment. This place, I thought, would definitely not be something I would miss. I bought some Thai takeout for dinner, and an hour later, I fell into bed and slept until the morning. When I woke up, I looked around at my modest belongings and came to the conclusion that I didn't really need them. so I went to my landlord and made a deal. I would keep all my furniture and kitchen utensils, and he would not charge me an early termination fee. He happily agreed because he would now be able to charge the new tenant more for a furnished apartment, so it all worked out for the best. After lunch, I realized that I couldn't put it off any longer, so I went to the photo agency. I had to pick up the last check, sign some papers, and of course, say goodbye to Starla. After my crazy call a few days ago, I didn't expect this conversation to be pleasant. The people in the office were very kind. They, of course, knew everything about my father, and the news that I was leaving also spread quickly. I received many warm wishes and even a few hugs from women. Starla was there, but there was someone else in her office with the door closed, and the conversation sounded quite animated. I waited a bit, but eventually gave up and left. I was disappointed that I didn't see her, but honestly, I was a little glad I didn't have to talk to her. After expressing my feelings in that phone conversation, I had no idea what to tell her now. Maybe it was even better this way. I completed a few more errands, and then, as the light began to fade, I decided to take another trip to Mulholland Drive. One last visit to my favorite viewpoint seemed like a fitting way to say goodbye to the city before leaving for good. I parked at the Grove Overlook and got out of the car to sit on the boundary wall. The darker it became, the more Los Angeles resembled a scattering of jewels shimmering in the distance. But now I knew that it was a rhinestone, not a diamond. They might look beautiful, but they served only to attract and deceive. I really won't miss it. Another car arrived and parked. This observation deck was popular, so I didn't pay attention to it until a voice said from behind me, "I thought I would find you here. You didn't even plan to say goodbye." I turned around and saw Starla standing with her arms crossed over her chest and an angry expression on her face. I started to make excuses, but then I stopped. "The truth is that I left because I didn't know what to tell you," I admitted, "after that stupid call the other day." Her face softened, and she came to sit next to me. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I understand." To be honest, I didn't know what to tell you either. We sat in silence, looking at the flickering lights. "It was crazy at work while you were away," she said after a while. "People came and looked for you all the time." "Were you looking for me?" I was surprised. "Who could it be?" She smiled slightly. "Kelly, for example. She was very angry with you, blaming you for everything that happened to her and Sal. I took the liberty of pointing out to her that they themselves were to blame for everything that happened. I don't think she liked it, so our conversation was short. But I found out that she was going to move back to Nashville and start over. Maybe it's for the best," I said. "I don't think Hollywood was the right place for her." "A day or two after Kelly arrived, someone else came looking for you," Starla continued. A sly smile appeared on her face. "Do you remember Bitsy? Did Bitsy Baker come?" "I wasn't even sure she survived the D-raid," I said. "She survived," Starla answered, "and, judging by her story, she stayed alive thanks to you." She ran her fingers over the scar on my forehead. "You didn't tell me that you were in that shootout and got wounded," she said reproachfully. I felt embarrassed. "I didn't want to bother you over trifles," I said. "It's just that Bitsy helped me find Billy, and I felt like I shouldn't leave her in the middle of a firefight." "According to her, it was the other way around. It was you who helped her," Starla said firmly. "She said she met you when you pulled her out of the truck right before it went off the cliff. She also said that you saved her child." "Her child is her dog," I laughed. "I just happened to be there when she needed help. Anyone would have done the same." "Yeah," Starla said skeptically. "Well, that's not what Bitsy thinks. Anyway, she said that she already thanked you for saving her life the first time, but that she still owes you for saving her during the drug raid." I rolled my eyes. "Bitsy is obviously a little frivolous, and she definitely doesn't owe me anything. I'm just glad she's alive." Starla didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes made me wonder if Bitsy had told her about how she thanked me. Starla seemed funny, but didn't get to the bottom of it, to my relief. Instead, she changed the subject. "The last person who looked for you," Starla continued, was someone I never expected to see. She paused, and I looked at her expectantly. It was Jinx McClure, she said. Jinx McClure, I exclaimed. Why did she need to see me? Well, one of the reasons is to give you back your phone, Starla said, taking my phone out of her pocket and handing it to me. She said she found it under the seat of her car. She looked at me carefully. You didn't tell me you drove Jinx's car. Well, it wasn't that important, I said. That night at the Emmy party, she had too much to drink or something worse, and I thought she shouldn't be driving home. That's it. She told me about it, Starla answered quietly. She also said she would have died on her lawn if you hadn't given her CPR. Well, I don't know, I said. Besides, she was unconscious and didn't know anything about what happened. Maybe so, Starla said, but Jinx was told at the hospital that she owes her life to someone, and she came to thank you for it. Well, I'm glad to hear she's okay. This girl is very confused. Starla looked at the lights quietly and then turned to me. Do you know how I said that I was looking for a hero, a knight on a white horse? It seemed like I had a real hero right under my nose, and I didn't even notice. I blushed. Come on, Starla, what kind of hero am I? I may have helped a few people in their time of need, but I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I just did what needed to be done, that's all. Starla continued talking as if she didn't hear me. And then I found out that my hero had feelings for me, although he had never spoken about it before. Now I was completely confused. But I couldn't say anything, Starla. First of all, when I met you, I was with Kelly. And then, after she left, I found out about what happened to you in college, and I didn't. I trailed off helplessly, then tried again. And when I found out about you and Hannah, Starla raised her left hand, and only now did I notice that her wedding ring was no longer there. What's happened? I blurted out in surprise. I broke off the engagement, she said quietly. Remember what you said about paying attention to your partner's needs. The longer we were together, the more it seemed that Hannah simply wanted to use me for her political ambitions rather than as an equal partner in a loving relationship. Over time, I realized that our relationship was built around what I could do to advance Hannah's career, not what she wanted to do for me. In the light of the city lights, I saw Starla lower her eyes. After being hurt so badly by those men in college, I decided the only way to find love was with a woman. When Hannah showed up, I thought she was the one who could give it to me. But after I accepted her offer, I began to doubt. I began to realize that I still had feelings for men, or at least one particular man. I always considered him my friend, but gradually I began to realize that my feelings for him went beyond friendship. And now I found out that he is not just my best friend, he is also my hero. She couldn't look at me, and there was a lump in my throat that prevented me from speaking. All I could do was reach out and take her hand in mine. She dared to glance at me briefly and then lowered her eyes again. When you left, I realized that I couldn't stop thinking about you. I missed you terribly. I missed a person next to whom I could relax and trust. When you said you wouldn't come back, it was like a knife in the heart. She looked at me again. And then you told me how you felt about me, and I knew I had to tell you that I felt the same way. I love you too, David. And just as a sense of hope began to grow within me, my mother's pessimism seemed to fill me again. But how can all this work out, Starla? Your home and your job are here, and I'm about to leave Los Angeles. She looked at me seriously. After your call last week, I made a decision. When you came into the office today, I was meeting with the head of the agency to discuss my resignation. I always wanted to go back to school and get my degree, and I figured if you had the courage to follow your dreams, then I could do the same. I was happy for her, but this seemed to complicate the situation even more. Where do you plan to go? I asked. Well, she replied with a small smile, I haven't given a definitive answer yet, but I heard that the University of the South has a good reputation. Now hope began to overcome the pessimism inside me, but I still asked, Are you sure, Starla? Do you really want to come back to Suwanee with me? It's a small town, and it's on top of a mountain, far from civilization. Are you sure you can be happy in a place so different from Los Angeles? What makes you think that Los Angeles is my home? Starla asked with a smile. Think about it, David. No one is from Los Angeles. Everyone came here. Do you want to know where I grew up? It was a small town called Boone in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. I'm also a small town girl. Then her face became serious again. David, if you want me to come with you, then I am more confident in that than in any other decision I have ever made in my life. I pulled her to her feet and stood opposite her. And I'm sure I want you with me more than anything in my life, I said hoarsely. Then I pulled her towards me. Now you better get ready, because I've been wanting to kiss you for a long time. And under the lights of Los Angeles, we kissed for the first time. After a long time, she pulled away from me and very timidly said, "And now I want you to take me to your place and make love to me." A small smile flashed on her face. "Just promise to be more gentle with me than you were with Bitsy, at least the first time." Damn that frivolous one, I thought. But he said out loud, "I promise that I won't offend you, Starla, not now or ever again." As we started to walk back to the cars, she reached into her pocket, pulled out the keys, and handed them to me. "You know, if you're going to be my hero, you should really ride a white horse," she said with a big smile. I looked at her in bewilderment. "Jinx wanted to tell you something else." "She wanted to thank you for saving her life," Starla said, pointing to the hill. There, parked next to my old Toyota, was a white Ferrari Jinx with a rearing horse on the hood. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.